going on
Yeah.
with the Post-Orthodoxy Roadshow.
Put on my own microphone.
Welcome to this
really
place.
Tiny windows.
I'm gonna wait. It's gonna take us a few seconds
We don't have any fancy intro,
to share the video.
but we ought to have good sound at least.
Post-Orthodoxy is live.
Really?
That's what it says.
And it even shows a little bubble thing?
I think so. Watch. I'm gonna watch it and see what happens.
Oh no, that's an old video.
Oh, season 2, episode 10, hyperpartisanship in the age of misinformation. We've already done that one.
Yeah, that was.
Oh.
All right. I can't hear you. Hopefully people can hear us. I have no idea.
We don't know. We're gonna wait and see if the thing
Videos.
comes up.
I'm gonna go to Restream
Yeah.
and see if it's actually live right now.
We're not seeing it on Facebook.
It says it's live.
Oh wait, here it is. It's live now. Season 2, episode 11. Sorry, we're having trouble playing this video.
Hey, there's my face, way closer than your face.
So should I come over? No, I should come closer to you.
Oh.
Share
So
now.
I have no idea if anybody can hear us. I hope anybody can hear us. So I'll scoot over like this. No, I should be over this way. Further away from you.
Dark Sevier shared Post-Orthodoxy's post. Go to newsfeed.
Oh, and you can't even see the title across the bottom of the screen at all.
Really?
Post-Orthodoxy season 2. It
Oh.
should be black, but I made it white because I didn't even realize. Let me see if I can hear us. It should be black.
You can hear us.
Oh, good. All right.
All right.
So people can hear us. That's good. That's what matters. We have good sound. People can hear us.
Yes.
I hope it's going through our nice lav microphone. That's what
Okay,
I
we've
hope.
got it all set up.
Okay, here we are.
Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy Road Trip Edition.
That's right.
We're-
It's only going to get better and better.
We're both on the road. This is our first time trying to do this without our swanky home setup.
But with our swanky new mobile studio setup.
We're figuring it out.
That's right.
Thanks for doing all this
I'm
stuff.
scooting a little further back every time so that hopefully eventually I'm the same size as you.
Right. So it's May 17th, 2021. There's some stuff I want to talk about.
Yeah. I hope there's some stuff that our friends of the show want to talk about too. Oh, we have a mailbag letter.
Oh, the mailbag letter. Let me go there.
We're going to be here with you guys for about an hour. We're keeping the dream alive while we're on the road visiting family. We're very grateful to everybody that helped us and supported us last fall with your donations so that we could create this studio and keep having these conversations with you. Obviously, a bunch of you wanted to keep having these conversations, and we appreciate you supporting our work.
Yep. I'm going to switch account to the Post-Orthodoxy mailbag.
Woohoo!
Let me find it. There it is. So we got a note from a friend of the show who said we could use his name. He's not afraid.
Not afraid of being a friend of the show?
No. So my friend of the show and close friend from high school, who I had not seen for 20 years.
Probably more than 20 years.
Way more than 20 years.
Sorry, I didn't mean to out your age.
It's all right. So let's say 1987.
Okay, that's like that's like 33 years ago.
30, okay. Anyway, I hadn't seen Bill in 33 years. And he and his lovely wife and wonderful children showed up at the consulate, our studio house in Butte, Montana, a couple of years ago. He just showed up. He says, "Hey, I'm coming to your town."
He was.
And
we were like,
40
hey,
minutes
friends.
later, he was at our house.
And we were eating watermelon and doing a puzzle, and they were so lovely.
And they're like, "We're going to Glacier National Park. Why don't you come with us?" And so we unloaded half their minivan because they were on a state park tour.
Like they
National
were
Park
out
tour.
on the road for months, so...
So we unloaded half their van into our house and just jumped in the van and went to Glacier with them for 2 days and camped out with their family. It was really an amazing, spontaneous event. But Bill, he said he sent us a note to the Post-Orthodoxy show last night, and he said, "I just listened to season 2, episode 7 of Post-Orthodoxy. I'm still trying to get caught up." Thanks for that. Concerning the FCC Part 15. So Ainsley got a new computer, and in the computer was a little note. And the note had mysterious language that I found my conspiratorial spidey sense found the language off-putting.
I found the language off-putting.
So anyway, he says, and there was a note in there, FCC Part 15. So he said, concerning FCC Part 15.
Oh yeah, but the note basically said, if you recall, the note said, this computer, this device is federally mandated to be fuckwithable.
To accept interference.
Yes. It must accept interference.
So I didn't know what any of that meant. It's technical language I didn't understand.
Sounded a little fishy to us.
So today, our friend and friend of the show and listener is going to help us clear up
what that meant.
What that meant. So he said, I have my technician class amateur radio license, ham radio, and am currently studying for the general class, so I have done some reading on this subject. I like having informed viewers.
This is a person who knows a little bit more about actual broadcasting than maybe we do.
He says, it is my understanding that if something like your computer puts out a radio frequency energy that causes harmful interference, which would be something like messing with the navigation equipment on an airplane, or even messing up your neighbor's TV reception, then you would need to take steps to stop the interference. The device has to accept interference from other things, which could be communications from someone that has priority on a radio frequency or a radio band, such as government or military uses. That could be the fire department, I guess, or the police department. Most things that have the Part 15 warning will never cause any problems for anyone. I'm not an expert on this subject, so don't go solely by what I have to say, but I believe this is close to the meaning of the warning. So I think it reminds me of when I lived in Hawaii. I lived on the island of Oahu. There's some old school folks around the island that used to pre-internet and still do when I was there in the year 2000 and so on.
They pre-interneted?
They used to do CBs to communicate between the valleys.
Oh, nice.
And a friend of mine lived in the valley, and he invited me over to watch football. And a guy we called Mayor Ted, we called him Mayor Ted because he had a backhoe. And when the rain came, when the roads got blocked, he cleared the roads. So he was the de facto mayor of the back of Palolo Valley. He was also a survivalist, and he set up a checkpoint after September 11th with a guy with an M16 that checked my license every day I went home.
Even though you've been living there for several years.
Even though he knew me. But he still checked my ID so I could get past the M16 so I could go home. Anyway.
Because terrorists.
Interesting cat. So he still uses the CB. So he'd get done with work in the banana fields and then sit in his truck and talk to his homeboys on the CB in the other farms in the other valleys. And when my other friend invited me to watch football at his house, we would be watching football, and every time Mayor Ted said something on the CB, it overrode his TV signal. So we were watching TV with commentary from my local kind guy on the CB.
Wait. So could you see what was happening on TV but just not hear it? Or
we could see what was
suddenly go like.
We could see what was happening on TV, but we couldn't hear what was happening every time Mayor Ted got on the CB and started talking about his banana harvest.
Weird. What if you had just turned your CB off?
We didn't have a CB. It was coming over the actual television. That's why this is what section.
I don't understand.
That's what FCC 15 code is all about.
Making people not do that?
Yeah, don't do that. So
wait. He wasn't in your house with a CB.
No, he was another part of the valley.
Have a CB in your house.
But his CB interfered with our television.
Cable TV. That's funny.
Anyway, so I think...
Funny problem, because you can't get a hold of him to tell him to stop.
I think FCC Section 15 has something to do with Mayor Ted and his ability to override the football game while he talked about his banana harvest.
Oh my goodness.
So I think that's probably Section 15.
I mean, I can see why, if one trusted one's government and one's people in power, one would be very glad to know that if necessary, we could override people's electronics to save the world. Or stop annoying things from happening.
The language was, your device must accept interference, makes me feel weird. until Bill Kleeman explained a little bit about what they're talking about. It makes me feel less weird now.
A little less weird.
And that's just really about the language. You know, to say your device must accept interference makes me feel odd not knowing what's going on.
Right.
Speaking of language, I would like to talk about the language of the Colonial Pipeline organization.
I would like to talk about how I did a lot of work today to try to get my beautiful gray hair to be less yellow, and it's actually more yellow.
It looks lovely.
I'm just going to have to pretend I meant for it to be yellow.
Yep.
I have one last trick to try, and my hairstylist is not going to be happy.
Should we talk about that now?
I'm going to say it right now.
Okay.
I'm going to put shampoo in dry. Destiny, if you're watching this, cover your ears. I'm going to put in blue shampoo on dry hair, and it might burn my hair forever, but by golly, I'll have yellow hair.
Why don't you just go get some purple stuff?
I got the purple stuff, and it didn't work.
Maybe different purple stuff?
I don't know. How many brands can I buy before my hair just falls off? Anyway, that's my thing. That's my big news.
I'm sorry. Sorry you're dealing with that right now.
See how yellow it is. All right, go ahead.
I still think it looks lovely.
So if I were to like Google the Colonial Pipeline right now to be like, hey, what's going on with the Colonial Pipeline? What would I find out?
Everything is about the hack. So if you've been paying any attention to the news, North Carolina, there's a pipeline called the Colonial Pipeline that runs from New Jersey to Texas that contains, I guess, at one moment, I don't know, the language is weird, 100 million gallons of fuel in it. And it's just pumping it to all these gas stations up and down the coast.
Okay.
The news about the Colonial Pipeline, which has raised some eyebrows for people who are sort of
watching the news more closely,
woke,
to
know that a pipeline is called the Colonial, because colonialism is not super popular these days. But anyway, it's the name of a pipeline, and it's an old pipeline. So the story, if you Google Colonial Pipeline, what you hear is some Russian hackers hijacked the pipeline and turned it off.
They turned off the gasoline flow.
Well, I think I guess they basically hijacked some information and said, you got to give us $5 million or we're not giving you your information. And they got their $5 million in cryptocurrency.
Nice.
And then the hacker said, hey, sorry about your country being full of scarcity morons. That scared everybody. That was not our intention.
Well, also the hackers didn't call us scarcity morons.
No.
They just said, we just wanted to get money, not cause everybody to go into a panic.
They said this is not political. We just wanted to make money.
Yeah.
So that's what you'll find when you go. If you listen to Post-Orthodoxy, or if you watch Post-Orthodoxy, a month ago on a tip from our Hawaii colleague, Evno Omni, we read a piece from an article about a pipeline leak in North Carolina on the Colonial Pipeline.
Which happened last year.
Oh, it happened last summer, yeah.
But I didn't hear any.
I didn't hear anything about it either.
Until Evno said, we're going to talk about this. You know, you guys
We're going to talk. Yeah, let's talk about this.
Let's talk about this on KTUH. You guys might want to know that 1.5 million gallons.
Oh, you just read the punchline.
I did?
Oh, yeah. So anyway, they said some ATV riders were riding along, and they're like, hey, look, gasoline in a nature preserve on the ground. So the pipeline company said, oh, yeah, it looks like we lost, holy cow, 63,000 gallons of fuel.
Oh, my goodness.
And then the news said, boy, these guys lost 63,000 gallons of fuel. And then it was kind of quiet for a while. And then the number kept going up. And it stopped at around 1.2 million gallons of fuel had leaked. And so I decided to Google to see what's going on with the pipeline. And I can't find very much information unless I start typing in very specific keywords. You have to be
specifically looking for the
to talk about the leak
spill from 2020 to find news about the leak.
And what I learned from the Washington Post, because I wanted to see most recent news about the leak, the most recent, what came up was something from like May 16th from the Washington Post. No, this is more recent than that. But it was a Washington Post, and I put in pipeline leak in Colonial Pipeline, and the only thing in this Washington Post article said some accounts pushed false theories that the pipeline hack was done on purpose by the government or was a cover-up meant to mask a pipeline leak or an environmental disaster. Now let's look at this language. Let's look at this language. They said, so it's the whole thing is about the hack. There's one little paragraph that says some accounts push false theories that the pipeline hack was done on purpose by the government or was a cover-up meant to mask a pipeline leak or an environmental disaster. They didn't say that there was a pipeline leak,
which is an environmental disaster.
The second largest gas leak in the United States ever recorded. So that's the only byline that we saw. And I like how they said a pipeline leak or an environmental disaster.
Both of which have happened recently.
I thought that was really interesting language by the Washington Post.
Well, and also that they're just straight out saying it's obviously a false story. Like, that's the whole point of having these discussions.
They pushed false theories.
Pushed false theories. And the Washington Post does not know that it is a false theory, nor have they given any evidence or any credibility to prove that they know it is a false theory.
We don't know.
We don't know if it's a false theory or not. It is a theory that maybe the hack was part of
a cover-up.
A cover-up.
And I don't know if that's true.
To get the people focusing on that instead of focusing on the 1.2 million gallons of gasoline that's now permanently floating around the eastern seaboard.
So if you're in the area where the gas leak is, you can start finding out some information on your local news. So I looked up WCNC, and this is from April 19th. We're like a month later. But I'm going to read some of this article from WCNC. They said WCNC Charlotte, when they visited the site, WCNC Charlotte's visit to the site comes as North Carolina's Department of Environmental Quality issued a public release on Friday saying data shows the amount of gasoline released in Mecklenburg County's Oler Nature Preserve exceeds 1.2 million gallon estimate.
That was just released in April?
That was a month ago.
That was only released a month ago?
They said
should have released a public notice last year.
No, but what they're saying, well, this is an update. They issued a public release on Friday saying data shows the amount of gasoline released exceeds the 1.2 million gallon estimate. And then, quote, a preliminary analysis of the data indicates that while the
toxic substance,
while the product appears to remain contained to the general vicinity of the release location and previously delineated product area,
aka the nature preserve,
the spill, the leak. So the previously delineated product area
where the product is not supposed to be.
There are zones where product is located deeper in the soil than originally modeled.
Yeah.
The update read. That language.
That's just, please don't read this. Please don't think about it. Please don't think about the implications. I hope moms and dads reading the news over the breakfast cereal before school ignore this entire press release because we worded it so grossly.
So let's go further. It is, and this is from the Department of Environmental Quality. So, and this is another quote from...
Anything we can do to keep mom and dad from knowing what's going on.
It's unacceptable that for 8 months, Colonial Pipeline has been unable to provide a reliable accounting of the amount of gasoline released into this community.
Does WCNC say that?
No, this is North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Secretary Dion Delegati.
Talking about the product area.
Yeah, she said, we will take all necessary steps and exercise all available authority to hold Colonial Pipeline accountable for what has become one of the largest gasoline spills in the country. Second largest at this point, and the estimate is still probably under what has come out.
Yeah. Cole Orton tuning in from the UK says it's quite possible the hack was done on purpose so that people can get Colonial Pipeline shares cheap as chips, which is a cool. And for those of you that have not been to the UK, chips in the UK are fries. So he's not talking about potato chips, he's talking about fries. But yeah, so people can scoop Colonial Pipeline shares while the stock is low because of all the problems, and then they'll make a ton of money when the stock goes back up.
Well, that's really interesting because I think that's a weird thing to do when the pipeline is now responsible for the second largest gasoline spill in the history of this country. I don't know if I would be expecting their stock to be going back up unless this thing covers up the spill. The hack.
Why wouldn't the stock go back up? The people that trade stocks, by and large, aren't like super worried about this county in North Carolina.
It's true.
Nor do they live in that county in North Carolina.
So let's see what Colonial says. They say to clean up the spilled gasoline, Colonial says...
You mean the product?
The product, yes.
You mean
the designated product area.
The delineated product area?
To clean up the spilled gasoline, Colonial says they are using an extensive network of recovery and hydraulic wells. In total, they says, this is their wording, there have been 118 wells installed to support product recovery efforts. The company says, as of Monday, April 12th, they've recovered 24,512 barrels of previously estimated 28,571 barrels, representing approximately 85% of that estimate. I don't know what any of that means.
You're not supposed to, I think.
So they said they've recovered 24,000 barrels out of at least 1.2 million gallons.
How many gallons of gasoline are in a barrel?
It's like 55.
Definitely nowhere close to
1.2 million. Right. Colonial Pipeline, and this is through a different news organization there in North Carolina. Colonial Pipeline said a through-wall crack that was defined as inches long was the cause of the product leaking into the nearby ground.
The nature preserve.
Yes.
Why is a pipeline going through a nature preserve?
Because it was done a long time ago and nobody was paying attention, apparently. People in the neighborhood didn't even know there was a pipeline in their neighborhood. So Colonial officials also said the leak may have been present for, quote, days or weeks before it was discovered. Other people are saying it might have been leaking for months or years.
For that much gas.
How do you lose 1.2 million gallons of gas? Of product. It seems like they must have a pretty good profit margin on that to not miss.
Care. It's understandable that a few million gallons will just go missing from time to time.
1.2 million? Meh. Anyway, so...
That's nuts.
That's the update on... While everybody is talking about people who might be cognitively deficient putting gasoline in shopping bags because of the scarcity, that is overshadowing that the poor company that has been hacked by the Russians...
And is losing product.
Is not really seeming to be answering to one of the second largest gas spill in American history.
Remember when we were all traumatized in our youth because there were just pictures all over Walmart of baby birds covered in oil, and that's why you should buy Dawn dish soap. That was really traumatizing for me. And this is the second largest one of those things.
Well, that's the thing. That was oil.
Yeah.
This is gas.
Yeah.
So when they said it's probably deeper than we thought, it's a solvent. It's just going to keep moving and going.
How are they recovering that? Does that mean they're finding pockets and puddles?
They're digging wells like you would for gas or oil. You dig wells, and then because it is a solvent, it's seeping through the wall of the well, I imagine, with water, and then they're sucking it out. And so they're going to keep sucking. So that's how people will get water.
Yeah.
in the area is they dig wells.
I wonder how many
And then
households are on wells in that area.
So that's the other news that I heard. Right now, Colonial has been buying up properties. I like this little news story too. Colonial Pipeline is buying up properties near it because of the noise.
How long have they been buying up properties near the pipeline?
Oh, since the leak. So while they're fixing the leak, it's causing some noise. So they just decided to buy up all the properties around the leak.
How does that make you feel? What goes ding, ding, ding in your head when you hear that?
Well, that came after the thing saying they haven't found any gasoline in neighboring wells. So they're making sure that the neighboring wells won't be tested.
Find gasoline. Looks like we'll never find gasoline there.
So they're doing it because of the noise. I'm sorry we're noisy. We're going to buy your property.
Right.
I guess we'll just be making noise forever.
Well, right. So why would one do this if one was a gasoline company? I'm always trying to what's the motivation here? Because people who think that we're crazy for asking these sorts of questions are like, yeah, but why would somebody do that? So I want to ask first, why would somebody do that? We already have kind of an ongoing chug-a-lug conversation under the surface in the U.S. in various groups around water rights, around water protecting, around the environment, obviously is a massive conversation, and specifically around pipelines. In Butte, we even have a conversation that's ongoing around literally kids' rights to experience the environment around them, which I'd never heard of that being a right.
The right to a healthy environment.
The right, the kids have a right in Butte, Silver County to a healthy environment, which is why they're rebuilding the creek in our county, in Montana.
They're not.
I mean, they're creating
a fake creek.
They're creating a fake creek where the old creek used to be, and they're stocking it with fish, and they're making it environmentally safe so that kids can go there and fish.
And have an experience of nature that's not toxic and killing them.
It kind of reminds me of what your experience of nature would be if you were on a deep space ocean liner for a couple generations, and they had created a naturescape in part of the spaceship, and you would have a creek,
a fake creek,
where you could go fishing in it. That's what they're making in Butte Silverbow, because at some point recently they determined that people have a right to experience a clean environment. So these conversations are going on. I can imagine that with all of this stuff going on, and with the Standing Rock pipeline being an ongoing conversation and an ongoing problem,
they said pipelines are safe,
that people with interests in gasoline and oil pipelines wouldn't want anything getting out that might lend power to the case that pipelines are a bad idea. That's kind of the why for me.
So the story was when I was a part of the Standing Rock story, going out and seeing what was happening, reporting on what was happening during the Standing Rock Dakota Access Pipeline narrative. The story is pipelines are better and safer than they've ever been, and they have all this amazing monitoring equipment so that no thing like that can ever happen. So I don't know. Maybe pipelines are safe now. This pipeline was built in the 1970s, and they can somehow lose 1.2 million gallons at least of gas without anybody knowing.
You know, I know a valve salesman that could maybe help us with that problem.
Right.
We should put them in touch.
Right. So maybe the new pipelines are absolutely flawless. I have my doubts. We live on tectonic plates. Things move around shift. Sometimes.
What if we made pipelines out of that wrinkly metal stuff that they make spaceships out of?
What's that?
You know, the wrinkly metal stuff that they put inside and outside of lunar landers and things?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to hold oil and gas.
What if we made them out of some kind of rubber tubing so that they didn't
What if we built some solar panels so we don't have to have as many pipelines?
I was walking through Walmart here in Missouri the other day, and some older grandma age type ladies were going down they were having a rant fest. And so I looked at shampoo a lot longer than I needed to look at shampoo because it was so much fun listening. And they're like, and they said this thing. Well, and then that's also happened. Well, and then did you hear? And they say blah, blah, blah. They were just like one issue after another down a particular political stream.
Which one?
It was a very right-leaning political stream of rants.
All right.
But the interesting thing is, no matter which stream you're ranting down, you're going to have it's not just going to be pure red or pure blue. And so these ladies, I couldn't tell at first which angle these ladies were coming from. And then at the end, she wrapped it all up with a succinct, and batteries, what you have to do with batteries? You know what they run off of? Electricity. That was her stamp on the whole solar panel battery conversation.
Wait,
was that you have to charge batteries with electricity
to run solar panels
or your electric car.
Well, okay, so the electric car does get plugged in from your house, which is usually from some petrol burning or coal burning plant. So
power plant or natural.
There's something to that.
I'm like this. She's making a good point, but we're so used to dismissing that point. Anyway, you said, why don't we build solar panels? And I was like, well, but
Bill Kleeman commented, and he said 42 gallons per barrel for gasoline. So they claim they have recovered 1,029,504 gallons of the spill.
Wow.
That's what they claim.
27,000 times 42 is that much?
I guess so.
I just didn't whip out my calculator.
No, that's why we have Bill Kleeman.
How the heck did they do that?
Well, that's what they claim.
So they're saying,
and we don't know how much actually leaked.
Right.
They're saying 1.2 million is not high enough. They say they've underestimated with 1.2 million.
So if I spill a bunch of gasoline into my garden,
yeah,
and then I use a special pump to suck the gasoline back out,
you dig a well.
Can I plant veggies in that garden?
Probably not.
If I spill a bunch of gasoline into a creek and then I suck most of it out of the creek.
Well, like I said, there are people who get their water from wells in the area.
Right.
So they're digging new wells close to the leak to try to get all the gasoline before it travels.
Does gasoline soak into bedrock and rocks and things?
We would have to talk to a geologist at this point. I'm not sure how.
Dick Gibson.
Yeah, I'm not sure how deep it goes, and I don't know about the layers of the earth in North Carolina.
Wow.
So they claim to have recovered over 1 million.
That's great.
Wait, they recovered. They say they recovered
85% of the spill.
85%, which I think is remarkable.
That would be great
if that's what happened.
I guess. Why are they buying all the properties?
I don't know why. Because of the noise.
Right.
Because there's some noise going on.
Well,
so anyway, while that story is going on, Colonial, yes, Colonial is now dealing with this hack, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the language of this hack. So, from what I've gathered, they said that Russians did it because Russians are our new boogeymen, and I think
that's still just a continuation of the Red Scare.
It's a continuation of the Red Scare because people who are political, they're really the political parties, especially
both sides kind of hate the Russians.
Not anymore. The Democratic Party relies on the baby boomer voter bloc to keep their power.
So people that used to be Republicans were all Red Scare, but now it's mostly Democrats who are all Red Scare?
Well, the Democrats have been, they are now Republicans. They don't know it. Joe Biden, and I hate to say this for people who are Democratic voters, Joe Biden would have been too extreme to be elected as a Republican in the 80s. His policies on immigration, his policies on school busing, a lot of his policies on criminal reform would have been considered too extreme for Reagan Republicans.
Too Republican for Republicans?
Yes.
What?
Well, if you look at his policies, his voting record,
And then
the
match that to,
initiatives,
like-
and you match it to the political landscape of the 1980s,
Right.
he would have been too extremely right for the Republicans in the 80s to be elected.
Wow.
But now Democrats have elected him. So I find that people say often politically, as people become older, they become more conservative. What was the line? Who said the line the other day? Was it our guest? That
It was
if
Chad Okrish.
Chad Okrish said, if you are young and not a Democrat, you have no heart. And if you're old and not a Republican, then you have no brain.
And he's like, that made me mad. But as I got older, I've begun to understand.
So I think what the Democrats have done is they have kept their base by becoming more conservative to ensure that they keep their core voter base. That's my theory on what's happening. So Democrats are now more Republican than they've ever been. Because if we were ever going to get universal health care, a pandemic narrative that we've had for the last year and a half should have been the mandate that Republicans or the Democrats in charge of the White House, Senate, and Congress should have been able to pass. That tells me that we don't have
Very Democrats.
a New Deal era Democrats in charge of the Democratic Party.
Right.
So why did I start going down this road about politics?
Russia.
So Russia is still a scare tactic. It used to be for both the right and the left. The right used to use it because that's why we need to have military.
Right.
As tools of the military-industrial complex, the right often used Russia to make us say, oh, well, we need to have more bombs. I feel like the right has lost their mind politically, and so has the left, but they've lost it in different ways. The right has continued to deal with gay issues of the LGBT community and issues around abortion to ensure that they keep evangelicals in their base. And the left has continued to scare baby boomers about the Russians to stay into power. So the pipeline hack is from the Russians. That spurred the hackers to say, we are not political, we're just trying to make money, okay? Which I think is kind of ironic because this is capitalism. We didn't mean to destroy the environment.
Right.
We just wanted to make money.
Well, and our friend DJ Iomni on KTUH in Honolulu, that we have a weekly conversation with him on his show Know Thyself on Sunday mornings in Hawaii. He said that he was actually a little disappointed that they apologized because he had been really hoping it was some sort of like positive environmental terrorism where people go in and make a situation so bad that you can't ignore it anymore and reforms get put in.
Right.
Technically you do something damaging to some people or some areas so that the long-term damaging effects of that thing are made known in a way that the people responsible have to change it for the better.
Right.
That's what he was kind of hoping.
Well, I think there was a hope that by hacking the pipeline, it would bring attention to the egregious environmental disaster that the pipeline just perpetrated, but it did not.
Yeah.
Instead, Russia.
Covered up.
Russia.
Yeah. Green Days in Florida said that himself and his baby boomer aged father's PayPal accounts were hacked by what seems like Russian accounts during the election. And that basically what the hackers made it look like is that both Green Days and his father had sent money to some Russian PayPal accounts from their PayPals. And they called PayPal and they were like, we did not authorize this money. And his dad got his money back, but Green Days didn't get his money back. They said at some point he must have authorized the charge. So the hackers made it even look like he had somehow used his own like two-factor authentication methods to authorize it in such a way that he couldn't prove that he hadn't meant to send money to a Russian account. Fascinating.
So Russians are it's the boogeyman for old folks. So I really, really want to go to Russia now. I talked to a friend of mine, Igor Zelenov, who is a He's an art director, and he is a what was his job description on his page? He's a hologram engineer or something. Anyway, he works in Moscow.
Hologram engineer.
Yeah, he makes.
What are we doing holograms for?
The Russians are making. I don't know. He's engineering holograms in Russia.
Maybe Putin is dead.
Right.
And he's just a hologram.
I asked him about what was going. I said, how are things? And he goes, things are normal. We didn't do the pandemic.
Yeah.
Stores are open. Nobody's wearing masks. We didn't really do it over here. And when I looked at all of the countries and their arcs of the spikes,
yeah,
Russia was not reporting.
Yeah, I know that.
So I don't know if that means that they weren't getting sick or Russia just decided not to release their data. But from what I understand, what's going on in Russia right now, the coronavirus it's not being handled the same way it is here in terms of social. So we know that England and Germany, there's a paper called the Panic Paper. If you look up Panic Paper in Germany, it was a paper created by the German government to say that we need to incite panic and fear in the population in order for them to take this pandemic seriously. There was another article in England about the English government doing the same thing, saying people are not taking this pandemic seriously, so we need to incite fear. And I don't know how you feel about your government purposely inciting fear in you to do what it wants you to do. It doesn't seem like a healthy relationship between people and government, though. So I guess Russia didn't do that. And whatever you think about Russia, I'd like to look more into that story.
So I wonder if I can show this to folks.
Yeah, let me see if I can see it.
It's going to show up like 7 seconds later. I'm just going to hold it in front of my face.
Here, you can see.
We'll see if it shows up. So this is a really cool website that I use, that I reference. It's called FT. Yeah, it kind of shows. All right, here we go. Let's see where I'm holding it, and then I'll adjust. Okay, so that kind of shows up. So these are new deaths, new coronavirus deaths per 100,000 citizens in Italy, Russia, the UK, America, and what was the other country I used? India, because they're also, people are talking about India experiencing a massive spike. And the highest spikes are Italy and the UK and the US. Russia is sort of this middly blue line.
This line?
Yeah, the middly blue line that just has, and the two spike zones are both winter times. So right. Spike zone 1 is last winter and spike zone 2 is this winter. These are all northern hemisphere countries who all experience their cold and flu season in like November, December, January, February, March of each year. Southern hemisphere countries experience their cold and flu season in June, July, August.
It's all whited out now.
Each year.
It's adjusted in a way.
So anyway, that's pretty cool. I'm going to share a link. You can doink around in that chart and find some really amazing information. Compare all of the countries. Now you can compare each country's lockdown measures, and you can compare each country's vaccine efforts, and see how the cases and deaths are spiking in each country in relation to when they did or did not lock down and how strictly they locked down.
Right. As we discussed on Monday on our show, countries with the highest COVID death rates were countries that have a larger than 50% obesity rate.
Which is very unfortunate.
Yes.
We have some pretty unhealthy countries. Top COVID death percentages were Italy, the US, and the UK, which are 3 of the most obese countries on the planet.
Which I think is a factor to factor in when you decide.
Correlation, causation.
I would like to know what the influenza death rate was in Russia, because apparently we didn't have one this year. Apparently there was no influenza.
You're starting to sound like a crazy person.
In the US. Well, how much influenza did we have last year?
Almost none.
Remarkable. I'm curious if Russia has influenza numbers from last year, since they didn't do the coronavirus in the way that many other countries did. Is if nobody was wearing masks, then did everybody, the normal flu rate continue?
Well, the influenza numbers, I feel as though an issue that we experienced was that the PCR test cannot discern between the various things going on in your nose. Scientists act as though the PCR test can tell you that you are actively infectious with SARS-CoV-2, which is the version of coronavirus that causes COVID-19 illness symptoms. However, the PCR test cannot discern whether you are actively sick or whether you just have bits of genetic material in your nose from viruses floating around on the planet. And the person that created it said so. So I would be curious to know what Russia's PCR testing routine was like, because I believe it is faulty PCR usage that is causing us to have skewed influenza numbers this year as compared with COVID-19 numbers.
Well, the PCR test itself said that it could not delineate between influenza A, B, rhinoviruses, or coronaviruses.
It says that on the CDC website.
So if you took that test and it was positive, it could not delineate whether any of those things were present or just one of those things were present. And it also could not tell you if it was a broken piece of RNA from one of those viruses or if it was an active infection. It cannot tell you if you have an active infection. So that's the problem with the PCR test. And so I'm going to be really curious to see how Russia's narrative plays out over time. In terms of...
Cole in the UK said that Russia never stirred up fear when the swine flu and Ebola was in the media. So them hyping COVID up was a first ever.
Did they hype up COVID? I have a friend who was in Russia, so
Maybe even just talking about it at all.
I would think that I understand how, like, a government, if we are to believe the stereotypes that we see in the media about the Russian government, that again, this is not conspiracy theory stuff. This is just basic capitalistic economics. What happened in the United States is with the lockdowns, note, lockdowns have not proven to diminish
the percentage of deaths that were going to happen
over time. So
it changes when the deaths happen,
but not the number of deaths.
But not the amount of deaths.
So when the lockdowns did not prevent deaths, it just changed the rate of deaths, from what I understand. However, the lockdowns did cause economic havoc on the lower classes and the middle class. And the cleanup of that is going to be the banks, which is happening in our town right now in Butte. Everything is being bought up because people are strapped and people are losing their businesses and houses. So who won in the lockdown game? The banks won.
Yeah.
In the lockdown, Amazon won. Who lost in the lockdown game? People who are losing their houses and their businesses and their lives because of suicide and abuse, et cetera, et cetera.
Mental health crises.
So I'm going to be curious to see how this plays out, because I think if that was a viable economic model for countries to pursue, I would imagine Russia being largely a gangster country, honestly a gangster country. The U.S. has always been a gangster country.
But we just haven't been. We're not a gangster country.
We haven't been so honest about it. Russia is honestly a gangster oligarch country. It seems like the lockdown would be a great way to do a land grab. So I'm curious if they did that, and if they didn't, why they didn't do that. I don't know. We'll look into that, and we'll get back to you next week on that.
Yeah, Russia and China are two things that I feel are just lacking in my awareness.
Yep.
I hear stories about Russia and China from my blue friends and from my red friends, but I haven't done any research myself other than like the unit study I did when I was 12, where we ate out of those weird long spoons, and the chief export of China is rice, and they hate Christians, so it was like, that was kind of my education about China. And we never really did any education about Russia other than like when Constantinople, I don't know. If somebody from Europe was involved with Russia, then we heard about Russia. But
right.
My history teaching was largely European.
I have a friend in Russia.
Yeah, we'll have to ask him.
I think he may not be in Russia now, but I think he was there for most of the coronavirus narrative. So I'll see if we can get him to correspond with us on a near future show.
That would be fascinating
to find out what's going on with Russia.
What is really going on? Maybe he can't even tell us. I think I have a correspondent for us from China too that I could get in touch with. Because,
if you know anybody in Russia that knows what's going on in Russia
and would be willing to talk
and would
about
like
it
to
on the
talk
internet.
about their experience of being in Russia and how America looks to Russia, like how America is portrayed in Russian media.
What do the Russians think of the U.S.?
And compare with us how we portray Russians. Right now, Russians are mostly portrayed as boogeymen for the benefit of the existing political class. But I don't actually know how much of that is true. Right. I don't think the Russian oligarchs who are running the country are necessarily great guys.
But there are billions of citizens.
But we have our oligarchs here. We just don't call them oligarchs. There, they call them the oligarchs.
Like, they know that they're the oligarchs.
They call themselves the oligarchs.
And they don't pretend.
Here, we call ourselves capitalists.
Senators.
No, the senators aren't oligarchs. They're tools of the oligarchs.
Oh, yeah? They're just low level.
Yeah, they're the in between the oligarchs and the voters.
We think the senators are the thing.
No.
It's actually the upper level Pepsi company.
How did Nancy Pelosi become a 100 millionaire as a public servant? We don't know. I guess it was her husband was a good businessman.
He was good with his stocks
and
his investments.
So
Green Days also suggests the documentary Icarus on Netflix. He says it's about how Russia has been doping their athletes for the Olympics and covering it up with fake drug test results.
Oh.
Among other things. So, like, just kind of I would just like any sort of insight into Russia.
Right. Cole Orton commented, the comment just scrolled past, but he said that he scored as a moderate last week, and every other week or so we talk about
hiddentribes.us.
Hiddentribes.us, where you can see where you land on the political spectrum. Some people who think that they are conservative land in a different place. Some people who think they're liberal land in a different place. So he said, Cole Orton, and he's in England, said that he landed in the moderate category. I would be curious to hear from him if that's where he thought he was.
Yeah. Did you think of yourself as a moderate?
Or did you think of yourself as a...
conservatives and liberals in the UK too.
Yes. It's a very similar model.
Yeah. And I think that's what this, we talk about the exhausted majority a lot, at least in the US. Many people on the left feel as though half of the country is extremely racist, misogynistic, anti-gay, anti-abortion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's actually a very small part of the right that holds those sorts of values. Just like it's a very small part of the left that thinks anybody that uses plastics is Satan. And those two very, very loud groups are what's on the news all the time. And in the middle is like 67% of the country that is referred to as the exhausted majority, which is people who actually just want to find a way for us to all get along, even though we believe different things on various issues. And we're not talking like human rights issues, like how should we farm and whether electric cars are good for us and can we have direct democracy? Those sorts of disagreements.
In reference to Russia, Green Days said bears on unicycles, the whole place.
Is that some sort of propaganda that you grew up with?
Oh, no. Yes, bears on unicycles.
In Russia?
Bears were a big part of their circus. It's a trope. It's a Russian trope, for sure.
I see. It's a Family Guy reference.
Right.
Funny. Cole considers himself a centrist, taking the best aspects of both wings and leaving out the bad. So is a moderate a centrist, or is a moderate more on the right? A
moderate. You could be a moderate. You could be moderate on either side.
I see the M and I think middle.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily... That's the idea. A lot of people who think they're radical left are actually more centrist in this country. Politically centrist.
Moderates. So the website has these categories: progressive activist, traditional liberals, passive liberals, politically disengaged, I guess is what they would call completely neutral, and then moderates, so just right, just conservative of completely neutral or middly, moderates, and then traditional conservatives, and then devoted conservatives. And they say that the moderates are 15% of Americans.
Moderates are 15% of Americans.
Which is this like mild centrist conservative. I wonder, you're going to have to get a bunch of your friends over in the UK to take this quiz and report back what you find.
What's going on over there.
How many of your friends are actually what they think they are or what you think they are? I'm really curious.
Well then.
This is the politics version of the Starbucks cup size debate. Am I a venti or a grande? Plus, we have to bear in mind that what Americans consider left and right are completely differently used in England. But in Europe, that's true. That's very true.
Well, like what actual left and right is completely different than what we consider ourselves in the U.S. as well.
Right.
People who consider themselves left, like people who consider themselves left are actually moderate or right, according to how that would be defined in the 60s
like
or the 50s or the 70s.
Of political stances
Yeah.
and policies, the actual spectrum of social policies and political stances, most leftists in the U.S. these days are pretty center.
If the Joe Biden Democrats were actually liberals, then they would make sure that we had universal health care, and they're not doing it. So they are not liberals.
Right.
They're not liberals. Especially after a pandemic where everybody needs some health care, and they're like, yeah, maybe this isn't the right time. That's not...
Somebody's getting paid.
That's not a liberal-minded...
politician.
Policy.
Yeah. Oh, we got to wrap it up for tonight.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in,
to have
folks.
all of you guys tuning in with us from the road. We're going to drive to Tennessee tomorrow.
Right. We're going to go to
a writer's circle at a small hipster bar in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, yeah. We'll have a report on that on Thursday.
That'll be exciting. And then Wednesday, we're going to drive to Oak Island, North Carolina, and see some of my childhood friends, one of whom is getting married on Saturday.
We're going to go through Sevierville, which is in Sevier County, which I pronounce Sevier, but the good folks in Tennessee pronounce Sevier. To visit the log cabin that was built by my great-great-great-great-grandfather, who was the
John Sevier.
Who was the first governor of Tennessee, and we're going to talk about how, I guess you would call him a land speculator. My parents called him a pioneer. And we're going to talk about that history.
Pioneering out there in the big old empty U.S. continent.
Just pioneering stuff.
Pioneering in the empty space where no one was living.
Yeah, making sure we get rid of all the pesky things that are there.
That we don't want to live with.
Yeah. So let's talk about that on Thursday.
But also on the way, tomorrow we're going to go to Hearst, Illinois and see Dave's Man Cave. Which we've mentioned a couple times before. I've been getting phone calls for Dave's Man Cave for the last 2 years thinking it was like Chinese spam. And it's actually well-meaning folk in Southern Illinois calling the phone number that's attached to Dave's Man Cave on Wilson Street in Hearst, Illinois. And we're going to go and say, hey, Dave, you have the wrong phone number on your machine shop.
Right. Her phone number has been posted as Dave's number for a number of years. And every time some Amish person calls and asks about some shears or a car part, probably not the Amish.
Tractor seats.
We do ask that they put a Post-it note on Dave's Man Cave and ask him to change the number, but it hasn't. So we have to go to Hearst, Illinois, and put a Post-it note.
Find Dave.
We have to put a Post-it note on ourselves. We have to do it ourselves.
Yes, we better remember to bring some Post-it notes because I don't think there's a grocery store in Hearst.
Probably not.
Okay, guys, we're going to end the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for playing.
Do you have anything else to say before the end, my dear?
No, I appreciate everybody who gets involved, people who are you early pioneers in the Post-Orthodoxy radio world, who are now part of the Post-Orthodoxy live stream and podcast. Please, thank you for being our family and continuing to be involved in the conversation with us, and we look forward to doing more of this in the future.
And thanks to Green Days for popping on. We haven't talked to you on Post-Orthodoxy here in a while. He came up with a band name from our conversation today. That's kind of his thing. And the band name for today is Holodeck Creeks.
Holodeck Creeks.
For our space,
Yeah,
our space liner.
I miss Green Day's band names that he comes out of our show with almost every time he tunes in. Please do more of that. We should have a running list.
Patches for.
We should have a running list of band names coined by Green Days on Post-Orthodoxy.
We'll have our editor keep track of all the band names that have been mentioned when he's going through our shows.
Yes, we'll have our editor take care of that. By the way, if you want to be an editor, let us know. We're looking for somebody to edit our live streams into a live podcast. So thanks for playing. We'll see you on Thursday at 5 Montana time.